I need you to pack a bag for the baby immediately. This gentleman is from the State Child Welfare Office and he has an emergency removal order," Sylvia declared, her voice trembling with a perfectly rehearsed performance of grandmotherly concern. She was standing in my front hallway, blocking the door. Next to her was a tall, nervous-looking man in a poorly fitted gray suit, clutching a standard-issue clipboard. My husband, Julian, was on a commercial flight to Denver for a medical conference, meaning I was entirely alone in the house with my 3-month-old son sleeping in the nursery upstairs. I did not gasp, I did not clutch my chest, or start crying. I stood at the bottom of the staircase, holding a half-empty baby bottle, and looked directly into my mother-in-law's eyes. Sylvia had been a suffocating, deeply toxic presence since the day Julian and I got married. She operated under the delusional belief that she was the matriarch of a dynasty, and that my sole purpose was to provide her with a grandchild that she could mold and control. When I established strict boundaries during my pregnancy, refusing her demands to be in the delivery room and blocking her from making unannounced daily visits, her passive-aggressive behavior mutated into active hostility. She began leaving voicemails accusing me of being an unfit mother, claiming my house was unsafe and my parenting methods were dangerous. I had systematically documented every single message, archived every text, and forwarded them to a family law attorney on retainer. "An emergency removal order?" I repeated, keeping my voice dangerously flat. "That is quite a serious development for a Tuesday morning. May I see your identification and the judge's signature on that order, sir?" The man shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. He unclipped a plastic ID badge from his lapel and held it up for exactly 2 seconds before pulling it back. It had a generic state seal printed on it, but the laminate was peeling at the corner, and the font was completely wrong for official government credentials. He then handed me a single sheet of paper from his clipboard. "Ma'am, you need to cooperate," the man said, his voice cracking slightly. "The court has determined that the infant is in immediate danger due to maternal instability. If you do not hand the child over to the designated temporary guardian, which is your mother-in-law, I will have to call law enforcement to facilitate a forced removal." I scanned the document. It was a spectacular piece of amateur forgery. The legal jargon was a mismatched compilation of television courtroom tropes. It cited federal statutes that had nothing to do with family law, and the judge's signature at the bottom belonged to a magistrate who had retired from our district 5 years ago. Sylvia was actually trying to kidnap my child using a forged document and a hired actor, banking entirely on the assumption that the sheer terror of losing my baby would shut down my critical thinking. She wanted me to break down, surrender my son to her arms, and spend the next week frantically navigating a bureaucratic maze while she played the heroic savior. "I understand," I said calmly, handing the fake order back to the man. "If this is a legally binding court order, I certainly have no intention of resisting state authority. I will go upstairs, wake the baby, and pack his medical records and formula. Please, have a seat in the living room. It will only take me a few minutes." Sylvia's eyes widened with victorious delight. She actually smiled, a genuine, terrifying smirk of pure narcissistic triumph. She gestured for the man to walk into the living room, completely oblivious to the fact that she had just walked directly into a trap from which there was no legal escape. I walked upstairs and stepped into the nursery. My son was sleeping soundly in his crib. I did not pack a bag. I pulled my smartphone from my pocket and opened the master control application for my home's integrated security system. I pressed a single red icon on the screen. Downstairs, the heavy, motorized deadbolts on the front door, the back patio door, and the garage entrance slid shut simultaneously with a loud mechanical click. The windows in my home are impact-resistant, reinforced glass originally installed for hurricane protection. I had just turned my house into an impenetrable, locked vault. I then opened my contact list and bypassed the standard emergency dispatch number, dialing the direct line to a captain at the local police precinct who lived in my neighborhood and whom I knew personally through a community watch board. I did not sound hysterical. I spoke with absolute, chilling clarity. "Captain, this is a priority emergency," I whispered into the phone. "My mother-in-law and an unidentified adult male are currently locked inside my living room. The man is actively impersonating a Child Protective Services agent and presented a forged judicial order in an attempt to remove my infant son from the premises. This is an active, premeditated kidnapping attempt and a severe federal and state offense. All exterior doors are electronically secured. I am barricaded in the nursery." The captain's tone instantly shifted from polite greeting to tactical command. He told me to stay away from the stairs, keep the nursery door locked, and wait for the breach. I sat in the rocking chair next to the crib and listened. For the first 4 minutes, there was only silence from downstairs. Then, I heard Sylvia's voice calling out, laced with sudden irritation. "We do not have all day!" She yelled up the stairs. "Bring the baby down right now, or he is going to call the real police." I did not answer. A minute later, I heard the heavy, panicked footsteps of the man in the cheap suit. He had clearly tried to open the front door to check outside and discovered the motorized deadbolt. "The door is locked," the man said, his voice rising in panic. "The lock doesn't have a manual thumb turn. How do we get out?" "What do you mean it is locked?" Sylvia snapped. I heard the sound of her aggressively rattling the front doorknob. "Open it! Break the glass! I am not breaking a window," the man shouted back. "You told me she was weak. You said she would just cry and hand the kid over. You didn't say anything about getting locked inside." The sound of distant, approaching sirens began to bleed through the walls of the house. It wasn't just one police cruiser. It was an overwhelming, synchronized wail of multiple units converging on my street. The sirens grew deafeningly loud, abruptly cutting off as the vehicles swarmed my driveway and the front lawn. "Oh my God," the man screamed downstairs. "Oh my God, it's the police. You told me this was a prank. You said this was just a family dispute." "Shut up," Sylvia shrieked, her carefully crafted matriarchal persona shattering into absolute hysterical pieces. "Just tell them you are from the state. Show them the badge." I unlocked the front door from my phone just as the officers began pounding on the heavy wood. The door flew open and I heard the unmistakable, booming voices of armed law enforcement taking immediate control of the situation. They ordered Sylvia and the man to the ground. There was a brief scuffle, the sound of a clipboard hitting the hardwood floor, and the sharp click of handcuffs. I waited until I heard the captain call my name from the bottom of the stairs before I unlocked the nursery. I carried my son, who had thankfully slept through the entire ordeal, down the staircase. The living room was swarming with uniformed officers. Sylvia was sitting on the floor, her wrists handcuffed behind her back, her face streaked with ruined makeup and absolute terror. The man was pressed against the wall, weeping uncontrollably and aggressively confessing everything to an officer. He was not a state worker. He was a struggling local actor that Sylvia had hired off a digital classified board for $500 to help her rescue her grandchild from a supposedly abusive situation. "She is crazy!" Sylvia screamed at the police, thrashing against her restraints and pointing her chin at me. "She locked us in. She is an unfit mother. I am the grandmother. I have rights." I walked over to the coffee table and picked up the forged court order, handing it carefully to the police captain. "This is the forged judicial document they used to attempt the abduction," I told the captain smoothly. "The man's fake identification badge is on the floor near the entryway. I have their entire initial interaction captured on the front porch security camera, complete with high-definition audio." The captain looked at the forged document, looked at the weeping actor, and then stared down at Sylvia with absolute disgust. "Sylvia," the captain said heavily, "you're under arrest for attempted kidnapping, conspiracy to commit a felony, forgery of a judicial document, and impersonating a state official. You have the right to remain silent, which I highly suggest you utilize immediately. They dragged her out of my house in front of the entire neighborhood. I stood on the porch, holding my son, and watched as they pushed my screaming, thrashing mother-in-law into the back of a police cruiser. I did not feel a shred of pity. When Julian landed in Denver and turned his phone on, he received a terrifying barrage of voicemails from his extended family, followed by a very calm, detailed phone call from me, explaining that his mother was currently being processed at the county jail for attempting to steal our child. Julian immediately flew back. To his credit, when he saw the security footage and read the police report, he did not defend her. He recognized the sheer, predatory insanity of what she had done and immediately cut all contact with her. The legal aftermath was brutal and completely unyielding. The actor took a plea deal instantly, testifying against Sylvia in exchange for a reduced sentence for his role in the conspiracy. Sylvia attempted to hire an expensive defense attorney, but when the prosecutors presented the forged legal documents and the indisputable smart home footage, her lawyer strongly advised her that taking the case to a jury trial would result in a maximum sentence. She was forced to plead guilty to severe felony charges. She lost her prestigious job in local real estate due to the felony conviction, and the massive legal fees drained her retirement savings. I filed for and icily obtained a permanent, lifelong restraining order that legally bars her from coming within 500 yards of me, my husband, or my son. She is currently serving a mandatory minimum sentence in a state correctional facility, entirely isolated from the family she tried so desperately to control. Sylvia thought she could weaponize the legal system and the terrifying authority of Child Protective Services to break me. She assumed that my quiet boundaries were a sign of emotional fragility. She failed to realize that when you back a fiercely protective, highly strategic mother into a corner, she doesn't panic. She simply locks the doors, hands you the rope, and watches you hang yourself.